disappearing as a corpse throughout the entire film. Everyone ends up dying and a true killer gets to go on his merry way with his identity still unknown. Can't get much more hopeless than that. Number 10, The Invitation. The Invitation is one of the most unsettling and suspenseful films released in the last decade, utilising a slow burner of a plot and some impressive direction from behind the camera to ramp up the tension and keep things enticing for the audience. The story of main man Will being invited to a dinner party for him, his girlfriend Kira and his old friends by his ex-wife Eden and her new partner David, the film rolls through Will's past traumas and haunting history with Eden, while simultaneously throwing a few hints along the way that things are not as they first appear. The first warning signs for the audience are presented when Eden and David begin talking about their recent trips to Mexico, where they met a strange group called The Invitation, who help those dealing with grief via an exotic form of spirituality. Eden and David also introduce Pruitt and Sadie to the group, who they also met in Mexico. The Invitation turns out to be a cult who are encouraging David and Eden to perform a mass killing in order to be free of their pain. Whilst they are overcome by our two leads, the final shot of red lamps being lit across Los Angeles is a gut-wrenching showcase of how widespread this cult's reach truly is. Number 9, Await Further Instructions. Await Further Instructions is the story of a British family who wake up one morning to find themselves sealed in their house and told to complete various orders by a message on their television. A real interesting premise that delivers a tense opening couple of exchanges between the family. The film really erupts into something far more bizarre as the TV's instructions become more and more brutal. The characters' true personalities and paranoias come to the fold and the whole thing becomes bloody mayhem before too long. The climax of the film reveals that a sinister, mysterious creature has been controlling the TV the whole film and that it demands to be worshipped. It takes the form of an army of cable-like tentacles that sweep across the house and swallow up anything in its path. Whilst it is initially defeated by the film's two protagonists after failing to go after an unborn baby, the film's closing shot of the being's tentacles sweeping into and devouring everything within sight is one final hammer blow in this pretty bleak tale on responding to authority. Number 8, Brightburn. Superhero horror films are painfully underrepresented in the world of Hollywood, but Brightburn is this shining example of how good they can be when they're done right. The film kicks off when an alien spaceship carrying a small baby crash lands on a small farm in Kansas owned by Tori and Kyle, a couple who are struggling to conceive a child. The couple name their new kid Brandon. However, it turns out that the newest addition to the family possesses superpowers such as super strength, flight, laser vision, and the ability to tank a bullet to the back of the head. A troubled, emotionally torn child, Brandon begins to unleash his powers in increasingly brutal ways as the film progresses and culminates in a tragic final scene with his mother at the farm. Learning that she plans to kill him, Brandon hurdles himself and his mum up into the sky, lets her fall back down to her death, and then crashes an incoming airplane. The film's end credits sequence shows Brandon beginning his attacks on the world, bewildering newscasters and destroying buildings in the most anti-Superman move imaginable. Number 7, The Descent. A timeless classic in every sense and one of the best examples of British horror at its peak. The Descent possesses an ending so bleak and hopeless that it was actually changed to a more uplifting conclusion for its release in the United States. Aww. The story of 6 women who go on a cave spelunking adventure, The Descent is tight, claustrophobic, and so often hard to watch because of director Neil Marshall's use of close-up shots. The caves the women are crawling through gets even worse with the introduction of the crawler creatures who reside down below. The film concludes with final girl Sarah climbing up a mountain of skulls and bones and finally taking in a gulp of fresh air as she pops her head over the surface. She reaches her car and has a vision of her friend-turned-nemesis Juno, whom she left to die in the caves. That's where the US version closes. However, the UK and Neil Marshall's preferred version rolls on to show Sarah is still stuck underneath the ground. She had imagined climbing out of the cave, imagined the vision of Juno, and well and truly caps off her mental break by closing the film with a vision of her dead daughter as crawlers close in around her. Number 6, It Follows. Low budget and a true indie favourite, It Follows is the tale of Jay and a mysterious force constantly hot on her heels. When Jay gets it on with her boyfriend, she's told that there is an entity that is going to be following her from now on. The entity can take any shape it wants, and whilst it is restricted to just a slow walk, will kill Jay if it catches up with her. Jay learns that she needs to have sex with someone else if she wants to move the entity on, but after it kills one of her partners and continues to come after her, she decides to try and kill it outright. An encounter in the local swimming pool concludes with a sequence of the entity being shot and the water slowly turning dark red. Jay and her friend Paul have sex. Paul then passes it by a group of prostitutes, and the implications are apparent for everyone else in the audience. The entity is dead. Paul has arguably passed it on to the best group of individuals in the world for this sort of thing, and he's now free to have a relationship with Jay. Except the film's final shot shows the two main characters solemnly walking down a street with a mysterious figure slowly following behind them. Number 5, Don't Look Now. Don't Look Now is one of the most gripping psychological thrillers to have emerged from the 70s and tackles the issues of loss, grief, and trauma following a loss of a loved one. The film follows couple John and Laura as they take a trip to Venice following the death of their young daughter Christine. Don't Look Now quickly begins to deliver on the weird front, however, utilising the colour red, the same colours Christine was wearing the day she died, throughout the film and keeping the audience in the dark with its big reveal until the very last second. Following the same red-hooded figure he had been seeing throughout the movie into a palazzo, it looks for a second that John and the audience might just have found the answers he's been looking for. The figure slowly turns around, however, and reveals herself to be a small, elderly woman who ignores his pleas and cuts his throat. Ending a film by killing off the hero with no resolution in place is pretty hopeless in itself. However, Don't Look Now goes one step further in intentionally everything despondent and confusing. Number 4, The Fly. One of David Cronenberg's best ever works, The Fly is one of the absolute must-watch films for fans of the body horror world. It is gruesome, gory, and caps itself off with one of the bleakest finales audiences had ever seen at the time. The film stars Jeff Goldblum as Seth Brundle, a brilliant but slightly deranged scientist that has created telepods that allow a person to travel from one place to another. Referenced in countless films, TV series, and music videos ever since its release in 1986, the telepods end up malfunctioning, and the film becomes a battle against time for Seth as he slowly begins his mutation into a disgusting fly-like creature. The Fly is filled with a hopeless feel surrounding Seth and his transformation, with each and every scene doing a brilliant job in making the tragic scientist look less and less human as he continues to evolve. The film's final standoff concludes with the last remnant of Seth's humanity clawing his way towards his girlfriend Ronnie and pleading for her to put him out of his misery. In one final gut-wrenching sequence, Ronnie pulls the trigger on the shotgun she's picked up and blows Seth's head off. Number 3, Drag Me to Hell. Whilst he might have become more famous for his original Spider-Man trilogy, Sam Raimi will always be loved in the horror world for introducing Ash Williams and the Evil Dead trilogy. Whilst he might have written it before production of Spider-Man, Raimi returned to horror in 2009 with Drag Me to Hell. Drag Me to Hell follows the story of Christine Brown, a loan officer who is cursed by a mysterious old woman after denying her an extension on her mortgage in an attempt to impress her boss. For the next 3 days across the movie, Christine is tormented by the curse, but looks to have overcome it after exercising the button the woman cursed. The film begins its conclusion with Christine returning home and preparing to meet with her boyfriend Clay at the Los Angeles railway station. Clay then hands Christine a small envelope containing a small button, and by now the audience begins to work out what's about to go down. Realising they had exercised the wrong button and that the curse is still fair game, Christine falls off the platform and is quickly pulled down to hell, doomed forever.
To try and stop
Number 2, The Blair Witch Project. One of the most famous films of its generation, The Blair Witch Project quite literally broke the internet when it came out in 1999. An extensive amount of work went in behind the scenes to generate the sheer amount of hype that The Blair Witch enjoyed, including shooting 20 hours worth of footage and creating a hoax about the actor's supposed disappearance. Helping to revive a previously dormant found footage genre, Blair Witch follows Heather, Mike, and Josh, 3 amateur filmmakers who venture out into the woods of Maryland in quest to make a documentary on the legend of the Blair Witch.
You there?
The film reaches a climax when Heather and Mike begin hearing Josh's cries and follow them to an abandoned house. The house is covered in legalistic demonic symbols and children's bloody handprints, and quickly picks off Mike, causing him to drop his camera and disappear from the film briefly. Heather heads into the basement where she discovers Mike standing in the corner of the room with his back to her. She screams, drops the camera, and the film abruptly
alone
wants
stay a
to
night.
scream. Number 1, The Cabin in the
Damn
Woods.
it, I
The
knew
Cabin
it.
in the Woods is an ultra-meta, well-constructed horror film that
Wow,
really
that didn't even
benefited from
cross my
delaying its
mind.
release until after Chris Hemsworth became an international
Yeah,
superstar.
that was kind
The
of
film
itchy.
opens up
Let's
in
just
a
forget it.
purposefully stereotypical way, featuring 5 of the usual horror movie cliche teenagers trekking off for a weekend alone in the woods. Staying in a cabin ripped straight out of an Evil Dead movie, the 5 teenagers stumble upon various strange-looking items in the cabin's basement, one of which triggers an uprising of an undead family that slowly start picking off each of the members
vowed to
one by
never
one.
come back.
It turns out that the entire scenario is a simulation hosted by a company that offers the blood of human sacrifices to the Ancient Ones, colossal beings that live underneath the Earth's surface.
Fine.
A whole load of commotion goes down as 2 of the characters, Marty and
No.
Dana, break
No
through the
keys,
simulation and
no
come
garage
face to
door,
face
I
with
can't get
the
out of here
director
without
of the
freezing.
company. The director explains how Dana must kill Marty in order to appease the Ancient Ones below. When Dana decides that
They might?
humanity doesn't deserve saving, the film ends with the whole world coming to an end as the Ancient Ones burst through the planet's surface.
Okay.
Pretty bleak stuff.
Oh.
And there you are,
Thanks.
the 12 most
Irving.
hopeless horror movie endings. But let us know your favourites down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click that
What?
subscribe button as well as the little bell icon to be
It comes
notified of
with
any new
job.
videos coming
You're
your way.
safe up
But for
there.
now, I have been Kirsten Ria from
relax.
What Culture Horror,
fine.
and I will see you in the next video.
Okay. Later.
I can't believe it. I'm stuck. Shit.
Hello all of you lovely people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and today I want to talk to you about horror movies, or more specifically about horror movie deaths that were, well, let's just say unintentionally hilarious. You see, this is the thing about horror,
Hello?
it's actually very close to comedy.
Is
What
that
one
Joe?
person might find
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying,
you're
other
improving.
people might just sit around
up?
and laugh at. And
nothing.
because of the nature of
just
presenting
wanted to
these
say
sort of things on the screen,
got
it does
everything
mean
you
that
need to have some
sometimes
fun.
even the
But you
best laid
should
plans
take a
come
look at
off
the main
as
power
just
source.
solid
You know,
punchlines. So let's take a look at some horror films that tried their best to scare us, but unfortunately ended up making us laugh. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 horror movie deaths that weren't meant to be funny, but were. Number 10, Decapitated Dancing, Jeepers Creepers 2. Jeepers Creepers revolves around a bat-like beast called the Creeper that awakens every 23rd spring to feed on humans for 23 days. Now at the time, this film was considered to be the next big horror franchise. I mean, after all, it was produced by Francis Ford Coppola, for crying out loud. 2 decades later though, it's mostly forgotten, save for one moment in Jeepers Creepers 2. In this sequel, the Creeper attacks a high school bus, attempting to devour the students within it. At one point, the creature envelops a teenager called Dante in his wings before flying away. When his friends pull him from the Creeper's grasp, it momentarily appears as if Dante is saved. As the camera looms in on the horrified expression of his friends, however, the viewer knows that something horrible has indeed happened. It then cuts to a shot of Dante's decapitated body spasming before dropping to the ground. Based on that description alone, this moment should be terrifying, right? However, all angst and anxiety in the
again,
viewer vanishes the instant that you see the
I could really
decapitated
use a shower.
Dante comically flailing around like he's dancing. Number 9. Michael Myers
Mom
kills
never
someone
wanted me
with
to
a
go down
gun.
there, but I
Halloween
love that
4.
place.
When Halloween became a hit, it reinvigorated the slasher genre, spawning similar horror series
was a
such as
pest.
Friday the 13th and A
Now,
Nightmare on Elm Street.
I think I
Although
even
serial
forgot how to
killers
get
like
there.
Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees became
I forgot
popular due
almost
to their
everything about this
over-elaborate
hotel.
murders, the recurring villain of the Halloween series, Michael Myers, usually killed his victims much more conventionally. After interest in the franchise waned, Michael's murders became more over the top. Instead of hacking his victims with a butcher knife, he would fry them on an electric grid or bore his finger right through their skull.
Is there
But one of
something
Michael's
else I should
funniest
know,
kills
like
occurs in Halloween 4, when Michael murders a woman with a double-barreled shotgun. Now, if you think that sounds out of character for Michael to use a
really?
firearm, trust me, it's much more dumb than you can actually imagine.
Let me
Michael
guess.
doesn't just shoot her with the gun,
beans,
he
right?
stabs her with it. He shoves the weapon so violently through the woman it pierces the door behind her, impaling
Starving
her to
suddenly
it.
seems like
Number
an
8.
acceptable
The
option.
Albino Spider. Verotica. Verotica is an anthology horror movie based on the Verotic comic series. In the first story, The Albino Spider of Dajet, a prostitute's breast cries a tear, Yes, you heard me right, which lands on a spider and then mutates it into a giant human/arachnid hybrid. And this is how the movie starts. So when the woman then goes to sleep, this spider entity manifests itself and prowls the street to find sex workers to kill. When the woman realizes this, she believes that the only way to destroy the monster is to take her own life. She swallows some pills and calls the police to tell them to come to her apartment, and when they barge in, they shoot the spider creature to death. The woman's sacrifice is meant to be noble and poignant, but it comes across as hilarious and rather nonsensical. I mean, first off, her breasts have eyes and it's never explained why, plus the spider monster kind of looks like a 6-armed Pennywise. Also, the seam of the man's spider crotch is visible, so you can clearly tell it's a costume. And finally, when the cops burst in, they shout, "Take your hands off her neck," even though he's not actually touching her. This film, I tell ya. Number 7, Eye Popper, Friday the 13th Part 3. In the Friday the 13th franchise, Jason Voorhees usually slays his enemies with a machete. To avoid the films getting stale, though, the murders in each sequel tried to be creative rather than scary. Watching Jason whack his victims into a tree or punching a guy's head off like he's in Mortal Kombat are intended to be funny. But there was one moment in Friday the 13th Part 3 that was meant to be horrifying, but unfortunately wasn't. So Chris is staying at a cabin in Crystal Lake with her friends and her boyfriend Rick, unaware that Jason is indeed on the loose. When Rick walks outside the cabin, Jason greets him from behind and squashes his head so hard his eyeball pops out. And because this film was shot in 3D long before Avatar popularized the medium, the director set up this shot because he thought that it would freak out the audience to see an eyeball seemingly shoot out of the screen at them. But sadly, it didn't work, because in this shot, the actor is blatantly swapped out for a dummy with a silicone head, and the eyeball is clearly hanging on a visible wire. Nice try, but no dice. Number 6, The Decapitation, The Omen. When an unintentionally hilarious moment occurs in a horror movie, it's usually because of a limited budget or an amateur crew or an inexperienced director. But that was not the case with The Omen. I mean, it was made by the Superman director himself, Richard Donner, and had Oscar-winning actor Gregory Peck in the lead. And although most horror films at the time were deemed inartistic schlock, The Omen was an instant classic and even bagged an Academy Award. On top of that, The Omen has one of the most famous decapitation scenes in movie history, but not for the reasons intended. In the scene in question, an investigator is decapitated by a sheet of glass that flies out of the back of a truck. Although the tone of this film is dead serious, this iconic shot is hilarious due to the blatantly fake head. Donner was worried that viewers might close their eyes the instant the sheet sliced through the investigator's neck, so he showed the moment in 7 shots in slow motion using 5 different camera angles to ensure that we witnessed it. Number 5, The Weasels, Dreamcatcher. So Dreamcatcher was the first novel that Stephen King wrote after he was nearly killed by a minivan. Now, once you learn this, it makes a lot more sense about how this story turned out the way it did.
Man.
In
What is
the
wrong with
film
me?
adaptation, childhood friends Jonesy and Beaver
Gotta aim lower,
find
I
an
think.
old man lost in the forest and allow him to recuperate in their cabin. When Jonesy and Beaver find a trail of blood under their bathroom door, they burst in to find the man on the toilet. When they nudge him, he drops dead, only to reveal that he has crapped out an alien that looks kind of like a weasel. Now, if you think that weasel is a ridiculous term coined by the viewers, it actually isn't. This is literally what they're called in the movie. There's nothing funnier than hearing the villain, played by Morgan Freeman, saying these words with deadpan delivery. These creatures are so absurd that you'd assume that King was trying to be funny, but in his own words, he believed that he would do for the toilet what Psycho did for the shower. In the years later, King did admit that this story isn't actually very good, and it's just another book that shows the drugs at work. Number 4, Dr. Vornov is killed by a non-moving octopus, Bride of the Monster. Ed Woods is often hailed as, well, quite frankly, the worst film director ever, since his projects were plagued with technical errors, nonsensical storylines, laughable dialogue, and atrocious special effects. And one of the projects that he was actually the most proud of was the Frankenstein-inspired Bride of the Monster. In this movie, and I use that word quite loosely, Dr. Vornov is conducting experiments to create an atomic Superman. And if anyone stumbled across his work, Vornov fed them to his pet octopus. Now, the film concludes with the mad scientist himself falling into the octopus pit where he becomes entangled in the mollusk's tentacles before being struck by lightning. Talk about overkill. Since Ed Wood had a minuscule budget of $70,000, which was ironically also the largest budget for any of his movies, he couldn't afford an octopus animatronic, so instead he had to settle for a puppet. So how do you make a giant octopus puppet look like it's attacking its victim, even if it doesn't move? Well, for Voronov's death scene, Lugosi had to flail about while holding the puppet's legs to simulate that he was being attacked by the creature. It is so evident that this octopus is not moving of its own accord that it is truly hard not to laugh. Number 3. Isaac's death is ruined by terrible effects. Children of the Corn. In this Stephen King adaptation, a couple find themselves in the abandoned town of Gatlin. They learn that the area has been taken over by a cult of children ruled by a teenage zealot called Isaac. Now, Isaac ritually sacrifices passers-by, hoping to resurrect his god, he who walks among the rows. When his followers turn against Isaac, they place him on a cross made of corn to serve as the ritual sacrifice. Despite the fact that he who walks among the rows has been unseen up until this point, he has been built up throughout the story so that the viewer is actually excited to see this enigmatic entity finally unleash its divine power. And what does he do? He casts Isaac in a fuzzy special effect before blasting him into the sky. Now, the special effect used for this light is so dated, even back then, that it looks like it was made by a computer from the 1960s. And to conclude a horror film with the antagonist shot into the sky like Wile E. Coyote being strapped to a rocket is absolutely hysterical. The fact that Isaac resurrects himself 30 seconds later before dying again makes this scene all the more ludicrous. Number 2. Corn on the Cob. Sleepwalkers. For the second time in a row, we have a murder that revolves around corn. Weirder still, both corn-related deaths were in movies written by Stephen King. I mean, that guy really must be scared of corn for some reason. Now, King has devised hundreds of bizarre stories, but Sleepwalkers might well be the strangest one. This film has literally everything. Vampiric incest, demons transforming into babies, killer cats, and cameos from Mark Hamill, John Landis, and Clive Barker. Each death also has such impeccable comic timing that you'd swear that you're watching a dark comedy. But one of the highlights has to be when a police officer tries to report a crime to his partner only to be killed by a vampire. But instead of sucking his blood or using her super strength, the vampire slays the officer by stabbing him with a corn on the cob. How did anyone working on this film think that impaling someone with a vegetable would be taken seriously? It is worth mentioning at this point that Stephen King cameos in this film saying the line, "I'm not taking the rap for this." And you know what? It's clear in hindsight that he was probably talking about this movie. And number 1, Death by Plants. The Happening. The Happening is considered to be one of the worst films directed by M. Night Shyamalan, which is actually pretty impressive considering that he also made The Last Airbender. As terrible as The Happening is, however, the premise is actually rather fascinating. In the opening scene, we learn that there's a mysterious force causing people to take their own lives. It's genuinely horrifying to watch seemingly normal people voluntarily plunge off buildings or shoot themselves dead. However, all of the potential terror is sucked out of the movie the instant that you learn the origin of the happening. It's unveiled that all plant life has evolved to spew a toxin that overwhelms people with suicidal tendencies. The idea is so silly, it automatically makes every death after this completely laughable. And it doesn't help that as the movie progresses, all of the suicides seem to get more and more preposterous. Even if the premise was better, watching a zookeeper feed himself to a lioness or a groundskeeper allow himself to be run over by a lawnmower is going to always be unintentionally comedic. And moments like this are so funny that viewers still debate to this day whether The Happening was supposed to be a genuine horror film or a throwback to cheesy, nonsensical B-movies of the 1960s. I mean, if I was M. Night Shyamalan, I'd probably be like, yeah, it's the latter, just to save myself some flack, but there we go. And there we go, my friends, those were 10 horror movie deaths that weren't meant to be funny, but totally were. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. If you want to chat to me further about all things to do with horror movies, video games, wrestling, TV, whatever else, you can do so over on Twitter at RetroJ, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice, it's my personal gaming channel where I stream every Wednesday and Sunday. Hope to see you over there. But before I go, I just want to say one
I don't
thing.
have
A detail
time to
today about
rehash
horror
my
movie
past.
deaths
No
that
one.
were
I've got a
not meant
different
to be
problem.
funny but end up
Someone
being
just gotta keep
absolutely
doing the
hilarious.
inspection.
But you know what, my friend? The only thing that we should be approaching with
It
such
was a
joy
bad
is our
connection.
own lives,
What
not
did they
our
want?
own deaths.
They
I hope
said,
that you're treating
"Rachel
yourself
is
well,
alive.
both mentally and
Don't
physically.
sell the
And
hotel."
remember, if you are struggling with your mental issues, then please do
something
not
else
worry
that doesn't
because
make
you are
sense.
not alone, my
The
friend.
phone lines are
Friends,
down.
family, professionals in the
Leonard stopped
support
paying the
industry,
bill
these people
months
care
ago.
about you and want
I'll
you to
ask
do
someone
well
to run a
because
check.
you are a massive ledge.
Didn't know
I know
FEMA
that.
had
You
FBI
should know that
authority.
as well. Don't let
Around these
anyone or
parts,
anything
time
else tell
passes
you
in a
otherwise,
different
okay?
way.
Now go out
Some
there
stories
and
seem like
smash
they've been
it.
forgotten.
As always, I've been Jules.
Actually,
You have
they
been
just
awesome.
sink
Never forget
down.
that. I'll speak to you
Sink
soon. Bye.
down.
Like tea leaves in a cup.
I think I get it. Almost.
That girl's death. Rachel. It was the result of...
Good old zombie movies are a dime a dozen, and that mostly boils down to the fact they can be made incredibly cheaply. Take a look in any bargain bin, and for every B movie you find, there's a solid ratio of them that'll be leaning in the favour of undead atrocities. So in order to be noticed in the world of brain-biting bother, you either need to be a massive release with millions of dollars of marketing, or do something different that makes your film stand out from the mountain
You know what I think?
corpses. It's hard,
They can
but
go
not
get
impossible,
fucked,
and as
every one of
such, I have a whole
know.
host of horrible treats for
No
you
one
that manage
else.
to break free of the
Fuck
bog
them.
standard zombie formula and deliver flesh-rotting terror in genre-defying form. Films that don't just follow trends or add in a charming gimmick like zombie strippers, but really care about their titty-twisting undead and do something new with them along the way. These movies take the rulebook and rip it to shreds, and offer some of the most unique, entertaining, and special films in the entire genre in the process. I am the recently reanimated Ash from What Culture Horror. Oh my god, that is still very
Fucking
exciting
joke,
to
man.
say. And these are 10 zombie movies that broke all the rules.
Daddy?
10. Warm Bodies. Romances in zombie films tend to be survivors that end up in an enclosed space, fending off the dead and forming a connection. Yet Warm Bodies goes for something completely different. Here, we have a survivor fall in love with a corpse that recently ate her boyfriend instead. Yes, you did hear that right. Our main zombie R has his heart suddenly start beating again due to the almighty power of love, and slowly starts to return to humanity. He ends up tagging along with his love interest, crafting a heartfelt and
wonder why
rule-breaking
that doesn't
rom-zom-com. If it sounds stupid, then you may be surprised to see just how well the film makes these ideas work, as the characters are super likeable and the film as a whole just oozes fun. There are also a ton of great gags as the zombie attempts to pass itself as human, wrapped up in an infinitely charming script. Warm Bodies has gotten a lot more attention over time than it did when initially released, and deserves to be watched for its special, funny take on romantic comedy with that wholesome undead flair. 9. Anna and the Apocalypse. Anna and the Apocalypse is a Christmas-themed zombie movie to give filmgoers a brain-boggling story to watch during the festive period. And on top of that, it is also a full-blown musical. Yes, this is just as daft as it sounds, but the movie is just the right amount of stupid and knows exactly what it wants to do. There are plenty of big song sequences, including an early show-stopping number that has Anna singing and dancing through the scenes of carnage unfolding around her as the zombie outbreak begins. It satisfies gorehounds too, with many blood-soaked showdowns with the living dead, whilst also keeping the tone light and bouncy to prepare for any of the superbly choreographed
almost
show
there.
tunes. The characters
the
are a
lights are
hoot,
getting
the
worse.
songs are great, and it is one of the freshest films featuring the undead in a long time that goes against so much of what one expects from a zombie film. It's not for everyone, but for those looking for a brand new take on the genre, they need look no further. Who would have thought the apocalypse could be this fun? 8. It stains the sands red. In zombie films, audiences have gotten used to
do
almost
remember
always
the
having the
Colonels were
shambling
really
undead
good.
coming in hordes.
I
In
wasn't
the
allowed
case
to
of
go
films
in
like World War Z or Train to
What happens when
Busan,
I get
they
to the
come in
closet?
literal seas of bodies, clawing and scratching in waves to get their next meal. It Stains the Sands Red decides to do the opposite and has our lone star pursued by a single, persistent zombie for its entire runtime. The zombie she names Smalls never sleeps, tires, or stops its pursuit. And to top it
found the
off,
crawl
the
space,
protagonist Molly
and
is in a
also a
massive
dynamo
desert
flashlight.
without provisions in the sweltering heat.
think I
The
just
film comes up with some ingenious ways to hold your interest with such a thin premise, and the results are often as hilarious as they are blood-soaked. Brittany Allen manages to carry the entire film as she squeezes the maximum amount of chemistry you could ever have between a human and a decomposing cadaver hell-bent on eating her. It Stains the Sands Red is a must-see for zombie film enthusiasts as it strips back the genre to its most basic terms and delivers a funny, unpredictable romp through the desert. 7. Fido.
In this 1950s styled world, zombies have been repurposed to perform tasks using collars that control them, and are essentially pets to many families. Fido gives viewers a peek into a strange world wholly its own, and is a welcome change to the hundreds of run-down apocalyptic cities moviegoers have gotten used to. One zombie, Fido, has his collar malfunction, and hijinks ensue as a small outbreak occurs in a small town used to their zombies being big toys. The plot is great, with a ton of hilarious moments and parodies sneaking in. And just to make things all the better, Fido himself is played by the legendary Billy Connolly. You never know what is going to happen next with a concept so fresh, and the script is surprisingly smart for what at first glance seems like a silly zombie spoof. Fido is a hilarious take on the genre with sharp satire and laugh-out-loud gags that almost all film lovers will enjoy, be they fans of this particular genre or not. 6. Life After Beth. In Life After Beth, Dane DeHaan's girlfriend dies. But that doesn't mean that she's gone forever. DeHaan is over the moon to discover she is resurrected and seems to be doing just fine. But, as with all things too good to be true, that soon changes, as Beth slowly begins to transform into a zombie over time. The film follows the slow descent of Beth's mind as she grows further into a terrifying zombie state, and we watch her powerless boyfriend unable to do anything about it. A pretty dark concept for a comedy film, but it works due to the actor's ability to bring out the laughs from a script that focuses on the awkward, funny side of becoming a brain-dead cannibal. Aubrey Plaza fully commits to the role and has some hilarious moments of physical comedy as she gets to grips with having superhuman strength and eating people. Life After Beth doesn't always work the way it should, and it can struggle to maintain a consistent tone, but it offers an entertaining, unique take on the Z formula, and the charming cast of characters definitely elevates the concept. 5. Zombieland. By 2009, the zombie market was just about dead. But like any good plot about zombies, Zombieland suddenly burst onto the scene and resurrected the genre, limping and groaning into the land of the living. The film follows the trials and tribulations of Columbus, who has a long set of rules on surviving the apocalypse, quaintly nicknamed after the title. Essentially a road trip movie that has zombies, the film goes against the rules of the genre by pointing out how silly a lot of the actions taken in them are, and then throwing it all to hell and taking them anyway. The film never sways into overly meta territory, with a smart script filled with surprises and one of the best cameo appearances in cinema history. Zombieland came out of nowhere to inject some life into a genre that was oversaturated for years, with a focus on having fun and going all out with its unique visual and narrative style. Ironically, it broke all the rules by laying them out for people literally on screen. 4. Paranorman. If there's one thing that Laika knows how to do well, it is a dark fantasy that carefully treads a line between spectacular imagery and nightmare fuel. Paranorman is no exception, and follows a boy born with the ability to communicate with the dead. Eventually, he accidentally causes the deceased to rise from their graves, and naturally, pandemonium ensues. The film is terrific in keeping the tone light despite the often dark subject matter, and doesn't shy away from surprisingly thought-provoking questions about what comes after we all kick the bucket. Fully embracing the morbid curiosity children have of death and the afterlife, it is a sweetly heartwarming tale for those who grew up loving horror from a young age. The gorgeous stop-motion animation is also a joy to behold, with the rotting corpses looking suitably gruesome and chilling for a family movie. In a genre defined by death and gore, Paranorman gave zombie fans something new and heartfelt to enjoy no matter what age they may be. 3. Pontypool. Pontypool takes a page from Orson Welles' War of the Worlds by having its fearful situation portrayed mostly through audio in a believable way. As a radio host, his drip-fed stories of the ongoing apocalypse on air to the world. That is, until the dead come knocking on the studio door themselves. In this incarnation, the disease is not spread specifically through bites, but via speaking in English instead, lending itself to some of the film's humorous moments, as well as holding your attention as you wonder how our cast will survive such a difficult predicament. Many zombie films like to have their scares as one-note jumps, with the biting, gnashing teeth of the undead threatening our heroes. This film flips that idea on its head with a deliberately held-back style to enforce psychological fear. There are few films really like Pontypool, as it goes against the established mold to deliver a compelling, slow-building horror with plenty of new inventive twists and rules to add to the genre. 2. The Returned. Zombie films like to have their universes overrun by The Walking Dead, and humans struggling to survive to the end credits due to said dead wanting to feast on their flesh. The Returned adds a clever spin on the formula by having a world that has managed to control the virus, and instead, it is the humans that our survivors must run from and fight.
What's good,
The
Venus?
zombies in this universe,
Give me
named The Returned, must take a drug
second.
every 36
I hope you're well.
hours to stave off infection and remain human. When this wonder drug starts running out, though, people go mad with panic and decide they must kill or return to keep themselves safe before they turn. Following a man who secretly was once a zombie, he must now survive not only people recently turning back into zombies, but also the humans out to get him. And on top of that, he has to find a new dose of the cure to prevent him from becoming one himself. That is one hell of a tough situation, and the suspense is high, with all of these factors playing against our hero and clashing in incredible fashion. 1. Shaun of the Dead. Could it really be anything else? Shaun of the Dead isn't just a zombie film that broke genre conventions. To many, it is one of the greatest zombie films ever made. Following a recently dumped loser Shaun and his freeloading best friend Ed, the film goes against type by having completely relatable characters
No
go
fucking
through a
way,
zombie
man.
outbreak who are completely unfit to survive it.
15
There
seconds.
are a ton of memorable set pieces, scores of instantly
was
quotable
that split?
lines, and due to the characters' aimless and ever-changing plans, the film goes anywhere but the usual direction that you'd expect from a zombie film. The film is also filled to the brim with horror references, a multi-layered script that rewards repeat viewings, and for a comedy, the film gets intensely emotional towards the end due to how brilliantly written
Good talking to my
the
girl
characters are.
about
Shaun
her.
of the Dead
My buddy
is
was
a
being
highly
followed earlier.
intelligent,
And they drove around.
hilarious,
The
and
fuck?
exceptional love letter to the genre that is a must-see.
Yeah,
for
people are fucking
everyone.
cooked.
And that's
Literally.
our list. Which of these rule-breaking zombie movies were your favourites? Are there any others that should have ended up on this list? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash over on social media at Ash Millman, and this has been What Culture Horror. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for some more undead content. Thanks for watching.
Reaches us.
Not every film can have a Ripley or an Ash, unfortunately. Every now and then, horror movies show the proverbial middle finger to those that have come before and decide that no one lives this time. That everyone is destined for the chopping block, no matter how hard they try to avoid their grisly fate. It's only fair, really, considering how grim horror movies can be, that no one makes it out alive. Sometimes, dead really is better. Whether it's everyone we see on screen biting the dust, our close-knit cast of protagonists, or even the world at large, death dealing is part and parcel of these movies that leave no one left to carry the torch. R.I.P. guys, R.I.P. I am the Grim Reaper, Ash from What Culture Horror, and these are 6 horror movies where everyone dies. Oh, and let us know what you think of this shorter list format in the comments at the end, too. 6. Cabin Fever. Cabin Fever is a darkly comic homage to the low-budget horrors and gory bonanzas that came before it. You know when watching a film by Hostel's Eli Roth that things are
Where
going
does
to
it
get
spawn
bloody
you there?
and get bloody fast. The film follows a group of teens escaping the stresses of college life by spending spring break in a remote cabin in the woods. I mean, who needs beaches when you can have desolate woodland cabins instead, right? As they enjoy their holiday of debauchery, an infectious disease and a tainted water supply eventually works its way into the group. One by one, each of them succumbs to a nasty case of skin dropping off itis. By the finale, only Jeff remains.
Bro, that's how it goes. That's how life is. Straight up. Every time something happens to my mom or my sister, nobody's around. 100%. That's how life is. Every time. Same here.
Meanwhile, the townsfolk
Absolutely same here.
and a truck filled with tainted water drives away. So, even whilst it's just our cabin full of grotty holidaymakers that die on screen, it is everyone else that will be biting it soon enough as the credits roll. 5. The Final Destination series. Yes, we're going to go full series here, since there's a couple of films in the canon that let survivors walk away from their films, only to give them a paltry off-screen death instantly in the next. By the close of Final Destination 5, however, everyone involved is well and truly brown bread. All the Final Destination movies follow exactly the same 3-step plot. Protagonist has vision, vision saves people, and death is pissed that it hasn't got its daily dose of salt. Where the variety and watchability comes through is in the ridiculous deadly set pieces. In the final 3 movies, for example, the disasters are a gnarly roller coaster crash, an insane NASCAR pileup, and a terrifying bridge collapse. Meanwhile, each film's survivors are saved by the clairvoyance of Wendy, Nick, and Sam, respectively. In extremely entertaining fashion, one by one the survivors are killed by, natural accidents, heavy emphasis on the natural part here, such as car crashes, botched eye surgery, and sunbeds gone rogue. However, the cherry on top of this ridiculously extravagant death cake is that when each group of survivors think they've outplayed death, they are proved very wrong. 4. Quarantine. So here's the thing for this entry. Quarantine and its Spanish predecessor Rec are essentially the same film in two different languages, and Rec does not kill off its main players as we find out in Rec 2. However, Quarantine's sequel tells
Can't believe I didn't
nothing of the
fucking
fate of
soft lock,
Angela, instead letting her encounter at the end of the first movie serve as a final moment. Both are
fucking believe
harrowing
that.
found footage films that get progressively more chilling. But for this list, Quarantine has advantage of leaving no survivors. Both films follow a camera crew as they report at a firefighting station, with the group soon called out to an emergency in an apartment building and then are locked inside before they can complete their job. Eventually, they learn the reason why. Their building is ravaged with mysteriously infected residents who violently attack anything in their path. One by one, the fighters, crew, and remaining residents are taken out, all whilst Angela and a cameraman film in shocked horror. Eventually, they are cornered in the penthouse building by a spine-tingling creature that butchers the cameraman and, in the film's final shot, drags a sobbing Angela to a demise. No getting out of your death in this version, Angie. 3. The Blair Witch Project. For those now just experiencing the horror genre, understanding how innovative and ingenious the Blair Witch Project was at the turn of the century is a rite of passage. Whilst horror was largely going down a campy, self-aware route, Blair Witch offered fans the found footage genre where the experience felt real, and terror and paranoia were at the top of the agenda. This frightening flick follows three friends, Heather, Josh and Mike, hiking through a creepy forest on the hunt for local legend, the titular Blair Witch. Though it starts out innocently enough, soon things go bump in the night, and the crew lose all sight of their bearing. Josh is suddenly lost, with only his shirt, teeth and tongue discoverable in the aftermath. Whittled down to just a pair, what sound like Josh's screams lead Heather and Mike to an abandoned house, and they are both swiftly attacked off camera before credits roll. Some might argue that we can't be certain of these characters' fates, but considering Rustin Parr, a serial killer allegedly under the influence of the witch, whose house they find themselves in, murdered boys whilst one faced the corner and then subsequently killed the other afterward, it is pretty clear what happens when the footage stops. 2. Dawn of the Dead. Imagining Zack Snyder watching the original Dawn of the Dead, you can just hear him saying, "It's good, but I wish it was more badass." So, in 2004, we were delivered his own take on an action-packed zombie extravaganza by the same name. The story mainly follows Anna, who goes from timid nurse to final girl material in record time. Snyder shows he is pulling no punches by getting serious straight away, killing a small child, before getting his core group together in a shopping mall to try and strategize against the horde outside. Eventually, after realizing they can't stay there, the survivors turn buses into deathmobiles and head out to the docks to sail their escape boat into the sunset. Only things don't go as planned. After plenty of chainsawing, explosions, and secret infectious bites, we are left with just a small pocket of survivors that make it to their watery freedom. All's well that ends well, right? Well, this does not end well. As the credits roll, a found footage continuation plays out showing the survivors pulling up to an island. An island that turns out to be crawling with zombies. At least they tried. 1. The Cabin in the Woods. On paper, The Cabin in the Woods sounds like another typical slasher/supernatural spookfest that pales in comparison to the likes of Evil Dead and Friday the 13th. But in execution, it is so much more than your average copycat. As expected, the story follows a group who rent a cabin in the woods and discover several cursed artifacts in the basement. There by design rather than coincidence, it is revealed that the cabin is controlled by a government agency tasked with playing out a real-life horror movie in all of its trope-laden, cliched glory, and they will execute their plan with deadly efficiency. What these suits don't count on, however, is their victims discovering the secret base where they've been manipulating the getaway, with Dana and Marty unleashing every monstrous horror movie trope encaged in the facility to fight back against their fate. The end of the film reveals that, to save humanity, Dana must kill Marty. Dana, instead, decides to share a blunt with Marty. And so, the facility's attempts to appease ancient gods living under the earth with their cabin sacrifice is foiled, and everyone on the planet will die as a result.
I should have just grabbed the microphone, I'm an idiot.
In for a pound. And that's our list. Which deadly movie is your favourite? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash over on social media at Ash Millman, and this has been What Culture. Don't forget to like,
How are you?
share,
This is my first run I'm able to complete since I got world record. So if I seem preoccupied, that's why.
Thanks for watching.
But other than that, I'm chilling. I'm good. But yeah, bro, people are fucking weird, bro. Like, you just gotta watch out for that shit. So I say mind your business, because there's enough trouble out there, you know? People will give you trouble. So, you know, you don't gotta add to it. Not like you, but I learned that really quick, because people are just fucking stupid, you know what I mean? So it chills you out, because you're always on defense. When so many people are trying to be on offense, you know? So you're
Some
like,
horror
fuck that.
films will do anything to scare an audience, not just the bad ones either. All is fair in love and genre cinema, and even many great horror filmmakers like Scream's Wes Craven or
People are just
Halloween's
fucking
John
cooked, you know?
Carpenter aren't above using dirty tricks like jump scares and "he's behind you" moments to spook their viewers. One of horror's longest standing cheap tricks, however, is the undeniably effective gambit of breaking the fourth wall. Nothing is scarier, and occasionally funnier, than when a film acknowledges that it's just a movie, only for its monsters to then threaten the viewers themselves instead of the movie's characters. It can be as small as comparatively subtle as an evil figure turning to stare right into the camera lens, or as dramatic and ambitious as an entirely meta movie which knows it's a movie. But there's one thing which the 10 films listed here have in common. They are all horror films which turned on you, the viewer, and their cameraman, to scare audiences senseless. Also trying to keep found footage cheating to a minimum here, so there's only one film on this list where the director opted to use that cop-out sort of meta framework. But I am Kirsten from What Culture Horror, and these are 10 horror movies which broke the fourth wall to scare you. Number 10, The Woman in Black. Released in 2012, The Woman in Black was a terrifying piece of period horror from the thought-to-be defunct British genre stalwart Hammer Studios. Starring Harry Potter himself, Daniel Radcliffe as a grieving father tasked with taking an inventory of a supposedly haunted remote manor. The film's creepy story saw a string of gruesome accidents before local children after the unassuming protagonist's arrival. This bleak flick was a tonal departure from director James Watkins' bloodier previous film, 2008's hoodie horror Eden Lake. However, despite earning a 12 rating in its home country, The Woman in Black managed to be more memorably dark than a lot of gorier entries into the genre. The film's scary simplicity is best epitomized in the closing moments of this chilling horror. Radcliffe's hero may be dead, but he's reunited with his son and wife in the afterlife, so at least it's not totally terrifying. That is until the eponymous evil turns to face you, the unsuspecting viewer, in the film's unexpected and blood-freezing final shot. Ooh, goosebumps. Number 9, The Tingler. 1963's The Tingler is not, by any means, the best film on this list, but the horror from exploitation legend William Castle is easily the most infamous one listed here, and for good reason. Following a scientist who unearths a parasite living in humans that feed off of their fear, the film's ostensible plot was simple enough. The director, however, had an ambitious vision for pulling off the movie's horror, which fell in line with Castle's earlier gimmick-based horror movie conceits. In the case of The Tingler, larger cinemas had their seats outfitted with vibrating buzzers. Yes, really. Thus, when the eponymous monster was unleashed on the audience late in the film's third act, the audience would be shocked, literally, to find something writhing on the aisles. The ludicrous gimmick was a success, and like most of Castle's films, The Tingler was
I need this quote to be
well
good.
received for a low-budget campy horror. Unfortunately, watching the film from the comfort of your phone screen leads to a pretty disappointing experience, as the movie really is lacking when shorn of its gimmick. Number 8, The Last Horror Movie. Released by legendary exploitation film distributors Troma in 2003, The Last Horror Movie is a tonally muddled British found footage horror. Not as artful as the earlier Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, this grimy film purports to be a genuine snuff movie wherein the protagonist is a serial killer recording his own murders. Throughout the film's gory runtime, he frequently questions the audience's motivations to continue watching. The film attempts to touch on a lot of the questions about screen violence raised by earlier films such as Michael Haneke's Funny Games and Man Bites Dog, but the low rent look and unintentionally goofy effects make this one a little less effective. However, the film does feature a deeply creepy closing twist, as the smug murderer informs the viewer that they're watching the only copy of this film. The last lines heavily imply that the killer is preparing to hunt down you, the viewer. Although this nasty shock does admittedly work better if the film is rented rather than streamed or watching for free on YouTube. Number 7, In the Mouth of Madness. One of the more mind-bending horror films on this list, In the Mouth of Madness was the final film in legendary horror director John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy after the dark sci-fi horror The Thing and the campier vampire film Prince of Darkness. The story of this twisty horror owes a
you
debt
serious?
to Cthulhu creator H.P. Lovecraft, as it follows
Wow.
an insurance agent's attempts to track
Fuck
down
me,
his missing
dude.
client, enigmatic horror author Sutter Kane.
I would
A
lose
thinly
fucking
veiled
time on
Stephen
that
King
dumb shit.
parody, Kane is eventually revealed to be a godlike figure who created the town his supposed insurance agent is trapped in. That's when the viewer discovers that said insurance agent is actually one of Kane's fictional creations. Not only that, but the world as he knows it is about to come to an end with the release of Kane's movie adaptation. This surreal film ends with its shattered hero laughing to himself as he watches the film adaptation awaiting the end of the world. As for the title of this cursed film he's watching and simultaneously starring in, come on, it's In the Mouth of Madness. Of course it is. Number 6, Unfriended. Released in 2015, Unfriended was a mean-spirited piece of teen horror from MTV Studios which centered its action around an inventive gimmick. The movie's action unfolded in real time, following the gruesome fates of some unlikable teens as the friend that they bully to death returns from the grave and offed them one by one. Not only this, but the film's action also took place entirely on the screen of one of the characters' laptops. The entire group are on an ill-fated Skype call for most of the film's runtime, meaning the audience only glimpses the gory death scenes via their webcam feeds. This inventive approach elevated an otherwise forgettable teen horror into a darkly funny success, and the film won over fans with a $64 million box office. The ingenious premise was never better used than in the film's closing moments. With everyone else dead, our ostensible heroine finally shuts her laptop, reminding viewers that the entire preceding film has been seen through her eyes. And the fourth wall won't save viewers from the vengeful ghoul who grabs the laptop that this flick is filmed on and attacks its owner in the terrifying last shot. Number 5, The Devil's Chair. Disliked by critics upon its 2007 release, The Devil's Chair is a disarmingly simple, low-budget British horror. The thinly sketched story follows a man who is committed to an asylum after the eponymous torture device kills his hookup. Hate it when that happens. Of course, this being a horror, some genius psychiatrist decides that after 5 years in the asylum, our hero simply needs to face his fears and return to the scene of the crime. What follows is a lot of creepy scenes wherein the doctor, his assistant, and our hero narrowly avoid sitting in said chair. Finally, after an admittedly tense but overlong series of near misses, someone takes a seat and all hell breaks loose. That's when this blackly comic effort features some hilariously unexpected and surprisingly creepy fourth wall breaking. Later in the game, our narrator admits that it all got a bit silly here, before berating horror fans with an audaciously scolding, "Look at this poorly written, badly acted shit. Is there any truth in this B-movie banality? Just like Gladiator." Except here, the hero is complaining about fictional films rather than real life and death combat. Close though. Number 4, Funny Games. The most infamous and ambitious entry on this list, Michael Haneke's Funny Games was the last in a long string of cinematic provocations from the austere auteur. Beloved by high art connoisseurs, his earlier effort, Benny's Video, came close to blaming violent movies for real-life murder and crime. In comparison, this 1997 home invasion horror gave up any pretense of subtlety. The infamous fourth wall demolishing exercise in meta horror sees a pair of well-spoken blokes break into a family's vacation home and proceed to torture and kill them. The gimmick, because even high art auteurs need one, is that these killers talk straight to the viewer during the film, kind of like a pretentious Austrian Wayne's World. What begins as some smirking aside soon turns to a disturbingly Looney Tunes cartoon as the pair resort to rewinding the film's action at one point. It's around this stage that viewers can choose between laughing at the audacity or solemnly nodding along to the film's sledgehammer subtle point of, "Those films will rot your brain, kiddo." Number 3, Blue Velvet. As far from Michael Haneke's Funny Games as cinema gets, infamous screen weirdo David Lynch's Blue Velvet was the Twin Peaks creator's first deep dive into subverted images of picket fence Americana. A suburban mystery, the film stars future Dale Cooper Carl MacLachlan as a well-meaning teen who becomes embroiled in all sorts of dark criminal underworld scheming when he spies on his stunning neighbor. The film's creepy, hypnotic mystery features memorable on-screen psycho Dennis Hopper as its chilling villain. One deeply unsettling sequence sees him assault a distraught Isabella Rossellini as MacLachlan watches, helpless to intervene. It's shortly afterwards that Lynch pulls off an audacious and deeply chilling fourth wall break. Remember that potent moment when Dennis Hopper's twisted villain stares into the screen to tell the voyeuristic viewer, "You're just like me." Sure, he's technically talking to MacLachlan's character, but there's no shaking the discomforting intensity of the scene, which manages to address the viewer directly without losing any narrative effectiveness. Number 2, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Some horror films are happy with just a mere moment or two of fourth wall breaking, but 1994's New Nightmare had bigger and stranger ideas in mind. This 90s meta-horror sees the demonic dream-invading villain of Wes
Sounds
Craven's
so hard.
Nightmare on Elm Street series, horrified to see his once
Can't do it.
ferocious on-screen image ruined by a string of stale, unscary installments.
When there was
What's
a
a
party,
slasher
Did
to
I?
do?
Did I do it?
Well, in the case of Freddy Krueger, the answer was attacking his creator, the actor who plays him, and the stars of his earlier on-screen efforts in this strange, self-referential film. Robert Englund plays both himself and Krueger, whilst actors John Saxon and Heather Langenkamp play fictionalized versions
think
of their
so.
real-life selves plagued by their on-screen nemesis. Trippy, funny, and damn scary, this surreal hit provided a blueprint for the latest Scream
Open
series.
carry legally? That's
However,
good,
none
bro.
of the Craven's later
That's good.
films broke the fourth wall
100%
as
that's good.
explicitly as the sight of Freddy Krueger attacking his own creator. Number 1, Psycho. A huge influence on the slasher subgenre, Alfred Hitchcock's legendary Psycho is a tense and terrifying story of one disturbed motel manager's murderous attempts to live up to the expectations of his beloved mother. Of course, spoilers, the film's shocking twist that Norman's mum is long dead and he's been impersonating her for his murders is still effective decades after its release. But it's the moment after this revelation that set the gold standard for horror's fourth wall breaking moments. After an interminable lecture from Norman's psychiatric evaluator, one of few flaws in the film, this classic ends on one of the greatest fourth wall breaks in film history. His narration slipping into Mother's creepy voice, Norman looks up and faces the viewer directly in the closing shot. As a skull is superimposed over his unsettling smile, he convinces himself that he's harmless, despite the moment's dreadful power convincing a terrified audience otherwise. Wouldn't hurt a fly indeed. And there you are, the 10 horror movies which broke the fourth wall just to scare you. But let us know your favourites down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button as well as the little notification bell to be notified of any new videos coming your way. But for now, I have been Kirsten Rhea from What Culture Horror. Too much? But I will see you in the next video.
When done well, few things can be as impactful in the horror genre as a good reveal. Having had an audience on a gripping roller coaster of a ride, a smart and clever twist can take an average film and make it a great one. Of course, the opposite can happen, with a fist-chewing, forehead-slapping twist easily having the ability to completely ruin the solid groundwork that's gone before it. I'm Jess for What Culture, and here are 10 such horror reveals that none of us were particularly ready for. Number 10, The Switcheroo, The Skeleton Key. For the most part, The Skeleton Key is a movie that seems to play it safe, rolling along at a steady pace and exploring a few elements of voodoo, or hoodoo as it's referred to here. What The Skeleton Key does have going for it, though, is the sort of reveal that can make a film be forever remembered. By the time all
Man's
is
gonna
said
be
and done
FBI
with
agent.
this 2005 picture, Kate Hudson's Caroline has been body switched with old and frail Violet Devereaux. That was all done by an ancient ritual called the Conjure of Sacrifice, with the form of Violet actually housing the spirit of hoodoo expert Mama Cecile. The painstaking irony here, of course, is that the only way that Mama Cecile was able to take control of Caroline's body was to wait for Hudson's character to start believing in hoodoo. The gut punch of The Skeleton Key is that you now realize that Caroline has to spend the rest of her days as a partly paralyzed mute trapped in someone else's body, unable to tell the world or warn the next potential victims of Mama Cecile and her longtime partner, Papa Justify. Number 9. Wait, Chief Brody is dead? Jaws: The Revenge. Having been the central protagonist of the first 2 Jaws movies, many were a little surprised to see Roy Scheider's Martin Brody not featured in Jaws 3D. But while Chief Brody's absence in that prequel was one thing, franchise fans weren't ready for the reveal in Jaws: The Revenge that Brody was dead. It wasn't even just the death of Brody that took audiences back, but even worse is that it happened between movies and was merely referenced by a few lines of dialogue in that 4th Jaws picture. As Lorraine Gray's Ellen Brody explains in Jaws: The Revenge, Chief Brody technically died of a heart attack, although she believes it was the pressure put on her husband's heart by his shark encounters that was the real cause of death. In truth, actor Roy Scheider ruled himself out of a role in Jaws: The Revenge unless his character was killed off in the film's opening moment. Still, using a throwaway line to reveal to the audience that Chief Brody was dead was something that many weren't ready for. Then again, that was just one of the many
That's right, my friend.
elements of Chores the Revenge.
Absolutely
Number
correct.
8, it's not their daughter. Don't Look Now. While Don't Look Now is a horror thriller masterpiece, there's a lot more going on under the hood than so many similar movies of the time. Rather than the cut and paste formula used by so many of its contemporaries, Don't Look Now instead serves as an exploration of grief, with Laura and John Baxter coming to terms with the tragic death of their young daughter during the opening act. After the couple make a temporary move to Venice due to John's work commitments, they soon find themselves
Oh my
starting
God.
to think that maybe their deceased daughter isn't quite as dead as previously believed. In their quest for truth, though, we get a conclusion that nobody was prepared for. That conclusion is part of a final act that sees
Oh my
John
God.
chasing through the streets and back alleys of Venice as he
Oh, please don't be a minute.
Christine. After
Be under a
finally
minute.
confronting this figure, not only is it not Christine, it's instead a little person who slices John's throat with a meat cleaver.
Like a condom or a gun. In this case, a gun.
His entire Venice day, rather than being
Rather have it, never need it, and
These
not
visions
have it.
Instead of John foreseeing his own murder. Number 7, it was all a coping mechanism.
Very true, my friend.
Goodnight Mommy. Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala's Goodnight Mommy is a film that spends so much time teasing you with one thing, only to pull the rug out from under you and deliver something completely different. In this 2014 picture, a mother returns home to her twin boys after she's had some plastic surgery carried out. With her face largely covered by bandages and with her acting strangely, the twins start to suggest that this isn't actually their real mother, and instead, it's an imposter posing as their ma. From there, we get to see the duo of Elias and Lucas go to the extreme lengths of tying their mother to a bed, gluing her mouth together, and then they eventually superglue her to the living room floor as they demand she explains to them what has happened to their real mother. The kicker here is that this
That's huge.
is their real mother, and the twist is that Lucas has actually been dead the entire time. Having gone insane after the death of his brother, Elias has been imagining his twin brother at his side as a coping mechanism to deal with his loss. But by the time all is said and done, his grip on reality is so far gone that he ends up burning his mother alive, with his own fate left ambiguous by the time Goodnight Mommy draws to a close. Number 6.
Okay, what the fuck? You can just like interact with that early?
Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Loosely based on the real-life atrocities of the murderous Henry Lee Lucas, 1986's Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer features a phenomenal performance from Michael Rooker as the titular Henry. Most people may know Rooker for The Walking Dead or as Guardian of the Galaxy's Yondu, but the Rook has never been better than he was in John McNaughton's chilling 86 offering. Having spent so much of the picture watching Henry and his pal Otis clinically butchering men, women, and children.
2009 reboot's not bad. I like that one.
The audience starts to think that there may, just may, be a softer side lurking somewhere within Henry. As Otis's sister Becky starts to break down the blood-stained walls put up by Rooker's character, it becomes apparent that there is more to this fiend than simply murder. With this pair having struck up quite the bond, the final act of Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer sees Henry kill Otis. From there, Henry disposes of the body and he and Becky hit the road, professing their love for one another and finding a motel. For those taken along by the dangling carrot of Henry having turned over a new leaf, though, a punch in the gut is waiting just around the corner, as the movie closes with a shot of a solo Henry dumping the blood-tinged suitcase of the assumed dead Becky. Number
You can
5,
interact with it.
Built on a Lie, His House. The feature debut of director Rami
The water skiing scene? Oh shit, wait till oh boy.
come around in many a year.
Never mind, you're gonna be in for a treat.
Impact is down to the reveal that the film pulls out of its back pocket during its second half. With Sudanese refugees Bol and Riel having seen their daughter drown during their painstaking journey to reach UK shores, it soon becomes apparent that their new English home is haunted by an apeth, aka a night witch. Complete with ominous warnings about stealing a life and being a thief, Bol refuses to listen to his apath, whereas Riel is more understanding and remorseful towards the presence. Where the big reveal is concerned, the left field slap around the neck is that it turns out their daughter was not the couple's daughter. Instead, she was somebody who Bol and Riel claimed as their offspring in order to be allowed on a bus to safety, following a brutal massacre, with the child's real mother left to die as part of said massacre. Number 4, Busta Rhymes and Kung Fu Halloween Resurrection. Despite being a disappointing entry in the Halloween franchise, the loose premise of Halloween Resurrection was at least an intriguing one that was very much timely for the movie's release in 2002. With so many people around the globe starting to be gripped by reality TV fever, Resurrection opted to take that concept and run with it. And thus, its 8th Halloween offering saw the regular slew of pretty young things placed in a camera-riddled Maya's house as part of a TV game show. The big reveal of the picture that nobody was ready for was the sight of Busta Rhymes pulling out some kung fu moves to beat the piss out of Michael Myers. Forever an unstoppable force of nature, the
I fucking hate those fucking stupid ass fucking things, dude.
To Busta's ability to not only go toe-to-toe with him, but Rhymes' moves being able to get the best of Michael. Number 3, brain transplants. Get Out. With his directorial debut Get Out, Jordan Peele shot himself to modern-day horror superstardom. What starts off as a simple story of a young woman introducing her boyfriend to her parents soon takes a shocking twist thanks to a game-changing final act reveal. That reveal is that Rose's family specialize in transplanting brains. Not just that, but the family are paid by elderly white people to have their brain and spirit implanted into younger black people. With those new vessels seeing their own conscience left in the limbo-like sunken place as part of this procedure. Throughout Get Out, you're always a little on edge that something isn't quite right about the whole situation. And it's refreshing to see that our protagonist, Chris, is smart enough to know that something is off, but nobody could have predicted just how Get Out would play out upon a first watch. Number 2, Esther was really a middle-aged woman, Orphan. The biggest reveal of 2009's Orphan was somewhat of a double whammy for horror hounds. First and foremost, we found out that the titular young orphan at the center of the movie was actually a 33-year-old woman with a hormone disorder. That in and of itself was a startling revelation. But before that knowledge, we had to watch the extremely uncomfortable moment that this supposed 9-year-old tried to seduce.
Fuck yeah, they did. They were like, nah, we gotta have this.
John spurned the advances of the deranged Esther. Although not so thankfully for him, this pint-sized psycho then stabbed John to death. What started off as a disturbing tale of a child who likes to kill animals and torture other children was flipped on its head and turned up to a whole other level of shocking by the time Orphan's second half kicked into gear. Number 1, the horrifying truth. Megan is missing. Just thinking of Megan is Missing's big reveal is more than enough to instantly turn your stomach. As you get to grips with the grim, disturbing reality of this 2011 picture's narrative, it goes and throws an even grimmer and more disturbing reveal your way. And let's face it, the numerous reveals of Megan is Missing are things that nobody was ready to see. To get to the crux of the matter, the titular 14-year-old Megan of Megan is Missing goes, well, missing. Played by Rachel Quinn, Megan disappears after agreeing to meet a mysterious 17-year-old skater named Josh, who she met online. With her best friend Amy desperate to find Megan, the truth of the matter becomes more and more uncomfortable as and when it's revealed. Having been threatened by Josh, Amy unearths the security footage showing her bestie being abducted. But in her quest to deal with the disappearance of Megan, Amy soon finds herself suffering a similar fate. Amy was then told she'd be set free if she gets into a barrel. In that barrel, though, we see the shocking image of Megan's decaying corpse. Forced into this barrel, Amy and the dead body of her best friend are then buried and left to rot together. Let me know down in that comment section what your favorite horror movie reveals are. I've been Jess for What Culture, and be sure to stay tuned for plenty more content. Maybe less horrifying, maybe more horrifying. We'll see how we go.
In his dark world made of silence and prayer, there's shown only one star. His wonderful sister.
Cinema puts us in some rough situations. Whether it's watching someone get surgically attached to someone else's mouth via their arsehole, or witnessing a divine eat a fresh dog meat. There's enough to put you off for life if you know where to go searching for it. Disturbing and dark, unsettling and uneasy, nausea-inducing and just downright nasty. Here's 10 scenes that will have you turn off your screen and walk away quietly for some internal reflection. These scenes have been picked for their point in the narrative build-up and their uncomfortable design. Whilst there's clips out there that will have you reeling from the disgusting visuals alone, hoping to never witness it again, these scenes
Bro, go fuck yourself.
Storyline punch. With that in mind, I'm Ash from What Culture, and these are 10 of the hardest to watch movie scenes. 10. 127 hours. The 127th hour. bringing a whole new dimension to getting caught between a rock and a hard place. 127 hours is a gritty endurance test of how far one man will go to survive. Just like the true story, director Danny Boyle subjects the audience to watch Ralston cut his own arm off with a dull 2-inch blade. Working his way through veins, arteries, tendons, and in one particularly wincing juice and chop, nerves, Franco depicts the torturous ordeal as painful reality. Coupled with some horrible sound editing and the tense build-up to Ralston's last resort moment throughout the rest of the film, it really is a difficult watch. One that you feel just as much as you see. 9, 7. Sloth lives. David Fincher's Seven is the brutal tale of a serial killer playing out his modus operandi in the form of the 7 deadly sins. It's the early discovery of Victor, a child molester subjected to the punishment of sloth by our charismatic killer John Doe, that serves as one of the most what the f*** moments in the film. Strapped to the bed for a year to the day, the decomposing body of Victor is an ugly sight to see. It's quite the surprise then, when he suddenly jolts upright after the inspection from a police officer, revealing for the past 365 days he has actually been alive whilst physically rotting away in the room. Going to extreme lengths to keep the man alive, it's not only a jump scare, but a horrifying realisation for the audience as we come to understand what he's been subjected to. 8. The Godfather. Horse's Head. This is a bit of an old school one admittedly, but it still packs a punch over 40 years later. Telling the tale of aging patriarch Don Vito Corleone, who decides to pass on his crime syndicate to reluctant son Michael, we watch as mob war ensues between old families over their values, morals, and allegiances. One such clash involves an offer you can't refuse, and a reasoning so intense that refusal will be the last thing on one's mind. Waking up to find his prize stallion beheaded and deposited into his bed, Jack Waltz gets a clear message from the Don to hire Johnny Fontaine for his latest movie. It's a dramatic, bloody and traumatising twist, one that has stood out famously over the years to the point where it's perhaps the most recognisable scene of the most recognisable franchise. A big claim to have. 7. Misery. Paul gets hobbled. When a freak blizzard causes romantic
Bro.
Paul Sheldon to crash his car, it seems to be good fortune that Annie is there to save him from his perilous fate. A trained nurse with a spare room she dedicates to his recovery. Of course, it isn't quite.
I mean,
as
I already have
simple as
record,
that.
but
Annie is
real world
Formula
record.
One fan who wants to read
A good
the
one.
manuscript for the final novel in the Misery Chastain series. Cue Annie's uncontrollable
Sub 121,
rage
that's
at
for sure.
authorial decisions, and in turn her need to control everything about Paul's condition. Using his incapacity to her advantage, she has demands about the content of his writing she forces him to carry out, culminating in one of the nastiest punishments on screen. When he escapes his confines, she places a wooden block between his legs and continues to shatter his feet with a sledgehammer. It's a terrifyingly violent act made all the more chilling for Annie's placid resignation and tinkling.
Yeah, good news too. Beat the Frozen
6.
900 SR by
American
5
History
minutes?
Curb
Jesus Christ!
American History X is a tough film.
Jesus
Mixing Nazi
Christ!
propaganda and exploring the stark realities of this lifestyle.
GG's, bro.
Edward Norton
Good for you.
plays Derek Vineyard, a neo-Nazi
About time you
skinhead
got
and
something for
leader of the
yourself.
white
In
supremacist
zombies, that
and
is.
golden-tongued influencer
Let's go,
within
bro.
his racist community. When two
Good
young
for you.
black men attempt to steal Derek's
Let's
car,
fucking
he
get it.
manages
I can't wait to
catch
watch it.
one of the pair before they can get away. Derek is blinded by a murderous rage, and we watch helplessly as he forces the would-be thief to bite the curb, promptly smashing his head in with his foot. It's his sadistic pleasure in the act that's so terrible to watch.
444.
And the deeply disturbing tone of the film is set.
It's lucky.
on foul blow.
Let's go, baby.
5. Deliverance. Squeal like a pig. Ed and Bobby get stranded on a riverbank after beginning a canoe trip with two friends. Finding the locals that they previously looked down upon wandering through the forest with a shotgun, they're taken captive. One tied to a tree, and one brutalized and forcibly raped. The whole ordeal is a very uncomfortable watch, but what makes it so much worse is his attackers' grunts of squeal like a pig. Some of the most horrible noises are created, and Ed
Same
is
as
soon
Rave.
targeted as the next in line for their sexual abuse. There isn't anything that can make up for experiencing Bobby's pain, but watching his attacker get a crossbow bolt through the chest is somewhat satisfying. Rape revenge movies are almost never focused on the male equivalent, so this scene and motivation is a surprise one to say the least. 4. Hard candy. Castration. The premise of the film lies in Ellen Page pretending to be a
What the
vulnerable
fuck?
teenager to lure a sexual predator to his demise. As you can probably guess, it gets uncomfortable pretty quickly. In the most unnerving part of the film's climax, we see an unconscious Patrick Wilson strapped to a table, waking up to discover Paige is about to perform a medical procedure on him. Not just any procedure, however, but a castration. He begs and pleads for her to change her mind, but the stoic and downright chilling Paige has no such intention. She then cuts his testicles off and throws them in the garbage disposal. We later learn that the whole thing is a setup concocted by Paige to punish Wilson mentally rather than physically, playing an educational video of a castration on a TV screen to convince him he'd been operated upon when in fact he remains.
Well, I mean, this is on the way to the garage for the skip, so I need to
Trainspotting sports a whole host of what the moments.
hurry up and get down there to try it.
Discovering innocent baby Dawn has died.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's good.
All four men faced with the sight of an unmoving child, witnessing the dead baby is a tough pill to swallow, especially for secret father sick boy whose visceral reaction.
See what he says? Yeah, facts. 5 minutes. Holy shit.
Don't know anything about what my mother and I went through.
Humor underneath the tragic circumstances. It's this scene that casts all laughs aside and shows the true horrors of a life-controlled by addiction. Nothing is quite as sad as seeing Dawn's traumatized mother begging for another hit after discovering her child's corpse. 2. Irreversible. The Walk Home. Referred to repeatedly as one of the hardest to watch movies ever made for those that have seen this nasty little French film. There's more than one scene that could make this list. Another being a particularly brutal fire extinguisher attack. Irreversible is a fragmented story of Alex's rape and the revenge her boyfriend plans to get on the perpetrator. Set in Paris over one traumatic evening, it's the scene of this terrible act that remains one of the most visceral in movie history. Playing out as a 10-minute long ordeal with an unflinching single shot capturing
this one is so fucking hard.
Showing little mercy to the victim or us as the audience. Forced to watch. What makes the film work as something other than exploitative is its broken narrative, one that frames Alex's trauma in haunting reality. 1. Requiem for a Dream. The End. At the end of this bleak tale of addiction and our perception of drug users, no one escapes their fate in this incredibly dark finale. All four main characters are subjected to their own hell. Sarah is condemned to electroshock therapy and loses what's left of her mind. Her son Harry is incarcerated, then has his arm amputated from a
That's a
nasty
joke.
injection
That thing's
site
so
infection.
fucking hard, dude.
His best friend Tyrone is subjected to harsh prison work under racist guards.
I've never hit it.
Marion's fate is seemingly the worst.
So
of
if
them
I
all,
did,
with
it's
her
just
body
bonus.
used as currency for heroin as she continues down the dark path of addiction, visualized in the shocking ass-to-ass sex scene. There's more than enough ammunition to leave you reeling, with all four symbolized curling into the fetal position as the film leaves them to their doomed lives.
Oh, fucking hell, dude. That's so dumb. I hate that.
How could I have forgotten?
It's like double cinematics. I never remember that.
I saw everything.
Doesn't matter.
Is at its most brilliant when it's
I think there's a lot of like...
Throwing in
I made a
something
lot
that
of
doesn't
progress on day
fit its
4.
surroundings as
I'm
an
pretty sure I
active
know
left turn
what our
only serves
issue
to
is.
make it stand out and stress us out that much more. Even when we're coming prepared to a movie we know is going to be dishing out perturbing content, the very best films are
I'm
the
so
ones
fucking
that
happy,
push
bro.
you to
Jesus
levels
Christ.
when you least expect it. The ones that leave you reeling in the aftermath. The ones that make you double take and question, what on earth was that? So then, these are the movies that used horror as a weapon, attacking both our senses and sensibilities with deviations into the horrifying when we are nowhere near prepared to deal with it. From sweet, beautiful love stories twisted by arresting imagery, to genre fare that subverted expectations to jaw-dropping effect. These are the moments of horror that make their movies all the more disturbing. I am the unpleasant surprise of Ash from What Culture Horror, and these are 10 horrific movie moments that come out of nowhere. 10. The Lovecraftian monster.
Yeah, it's pretty long.
Spring, for the most part, is a romantic getaway
Because this
movie.
is one of the sections that like hasn't been as broken. I think Mild broke it like a little bit, but he didn't like fully explain like what he was doing and how he was doing it.
One who tries to keep from Evan until
And
finally
plus,
succumbing to a
with no way to load
transformation
ILs,
While we've
Unless
seen
you're putting in a
glimpses of
save.
this creature throughout,
It's pretty
as a
difficult.
scaly lizard woman most prominently, it's only when Evan breaks into
To, like,
Louise's
practice, you
flat
know?
to check on her that we see the true extent
This
of
skip is like the
condition.
biggest issue
Yes,
here.
we do expect to see a true form at some point in this movie, but can anyone rightly say they were ready for quite this horror? Louise is in an octopus-like state, tentacle sprouting where her limbs once were, and writhing desperately to try and reach her cure. And as soon as we are offered this incredible monster snippet, it's taken away, with the rest of the movie played out relatively normally. It is the perfect fever dream moment.
Realistically,
that
you could
cements the horror of
have this
movie
split be
in one
like
swift
before
jab
you
of
get into the
scene.
car.
9. Harpy Attack. The Last Unicorn. Similar to Don Bluth films of the 80s,
It'll be kinda
The Last
long, but-
Unicorn is a touching piece of animated cinema wrapped up in what would seem like the perfect children's movie at first glance. Magical creatures in an enchanted forest? Check. Hero's quest to save unicorns from extinction? Check. Whimsical characters with soft voices and kind hearts? Check. But amongst all this beautiful scenery and unicorn revelry, there lies plenty of darkness and unprecedented trauma. And no moment quite encapsulates this juxtaposition as well as the Harpy Attack. Captured by Mommy Fortuna, a witch running a midnight carnival full of animals dressed to appear as mythical monsters, the harpy is one of the few creatures Fortuna has that is the real deal. And oh boy, is the harpy not happy when the unicorn frees her from her cage. Fortuna, knowing her fate, holds her arms to the sky and laughs at her incoming doom as the harpy swoops in. And all children watching this movie for the nice unicorn are shown a woman killed by a teat-bearing vulture. It's intense, to say the least. 8. Galadriel's transformation. The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. While Bilbo going full goblin whilst talking to Frodo might stand as one of the best jump scares around, it is Galadriel's dream of power that serves as one of the most iconic scenes in the entire series. Iconic, yes, but also terrifying. Something that seems to be forgotten in the aftermath of The Lord of the Rings' smash success. The Lady of Light is fair and graceful, constantly presented as emitting a warm, comforting glow as she settles the visiting fellowship into her home. When speaking with Frodo privately, however, she lets this pristine white exterior slip, and what lies beneath is quite different. Lured into a power fantasy that sees her light swap for darkness, Galadriel knows how strong she could be should she give in to her desires for the One Ring. Her voice drops, her glow is snuffed out, and her aura switches from regal to threatening, unleashing an evil that is otherwise constantly kept in check. Learning that the most beautiful and kind of all characters is infected with this insatiable need for the ring is a rude wake-up call for anyone forgetting quite what horrors poor Frodo is dealing with. 7. The restaurant scene. The Invisible Man. Lee Whannell's take on the classic Universal monster, the Invisible Man, is undoubtedly one of the best horror offerings of 2020. Balancing superb filmmaking with a solid plot that forces us to look for horror in every empty space on screen, Whannell has made a movie that makes nothing, literally, terrifying. So imagine the surprise when it turns out that the space doesn't need to be empty for horror to come knocking. After establishing that an invisible presence is tormenting Cecilia when nobody can prove otherwise, her plan to meet with her sister in a public restaurant seems like a solid one. After all, the transparent menace wouldn't dare be bold enough to reveal himself to the wider world and lose his unseen advantage, surely. Wrong. Being in a public place just means Mr. Invisible can enact heinous crimes and pin them on Cecilia even more effectively, choosing to quickly and cleanly slash her sister's throat before placing the bloody knife in the shocked Cecilia's hand. It's a scene that is as jaw-dropping for its audacity as it is stressful in its implication, proving literally nowhere is safe from Adrian's influence. 6. Out of the Wall. A Pterodos. Terrified. Right, so in a film that directly translates to terrified, it is only fair to expect your due share of horrific moments. It's a horror movie, there's gonna be horror. That's just the way it goes. But as this list proves, there's times when even contextual clues for just how unsettling a film is gonna be doesn't quite prepare you for the moments when boundaries are gonna be pushed. Whilst the moment a creature appears under one traumatized neighbor's bed is definitely a standout, the one that truly embodies the what the f***ery of this film is when one of the paranormal investigators checking out a series of supernatural events discovers the cause of such disturbances. Peering into a crack in the wall, she tells us it's a case of a dimensional rift, and that another world is crossing with our own. Just as she tells us that there's no way to stop it, a long, spiny limb reaches out from the crack and kills her, before stretching the wall open and crawling out to harass another poor investigator rightly suffering a heart attack. The imagery of this film is no joke for starters, but it's this moment demonstrating the crossing of the divide that really hits home. 5. Falling apart through time. Looper. Science fiction isn't always rooted in horror, but when the two intertwine their time-hopping nonsense and bloodied bodies, something transcendent of both is often created. For the most part, Looper is a solid sci-fi flick with a deliciously dark story at its heart. That of a mob who can send back their victims in time to kill them so there's no trace of their crimes. But it is the death of Seth that really solidifies quite what a dystopian future we're in. Seth hasn't done as he's told, and so his body is used as a conduit for communication with his older self by way of, mutilation. We're forced to watch his older counterpart scrabble to an address that appears as scars on his arm, attempting to hold himself together as fingers, feet, and even his nose slowly disappear from his body. The implication being that young Seth is getting hacked apart along the way, and the injuries are then healing on his older body. Grim. 4. That's no doll. The Boy. There's some debate surrounding whether The Boy's twist is a good one or not. Some claim to have predicted it from the outset. Others claim to have had an inkling, only to be misled by the apparent paranormal actions that take place throughout the narrative. The rest of us didn't see it coming from a mile off, and were too enraptured with the tale of what should have, by all accounts, been a formulaic haunted doll flick. However, the moment that Brahms blasts open a mirror and steps through from the crawl space to reveal himself as a flesh and blood human, a real boy, Mr. Geppetto, is undeniably creepy no matter what your opinion on its inclusion. Beckoned forth at the destruction of his effigy, the boy climbs out of his tattered home and reveals his porcelain face, before beating the crap out of the people that forced him out of his clever hiding spot in the walls. For those that didn't see this coming, oh boy, it's a horrible treat. 3. The destruction of the Warren. Watership Down. The OG in traumatic children's movies that blindside you with horrific sequences out of nowhere, Watership Down has upset plenty of kids, teens, and fully grown adults in the years since its release. Knowing what you're in for doesn't diminish its effects either, as watching a bunch of cartoon bunnies hop around their burrow is anything but threatening. That is, until Fiver has a vision, and his premonition of a deadly future actually comes to pass. Swirling fields of red and suffocating rabbits fill the screen, beginning with Fiver's original bad feeling materializing as shifting, bloodied shapes before later being confirmed by an injured rabbit later in the movie. Captain Holly finds Fiver and tells him his vision was true, bringing up images of ghostly bunnies gasping for air and choking in their homes. A world away from the colourful adventures our ragtag group are set upon. Unbelievably, even with these insidious moments, the movie is rated a U. Perhaps that just stands for upsetting, then. 2. Ending Spider. Enemy. Enemy is a whole mess of weirdness from start to finish. This is a movie that revels in its unconventional narrative, an A24 experience at its most potent, one unafraid to dish out spidery horrors that last far longer in memory than its beguiling plot. It's true to say that any lasting impression is pretty clouded, since we're faced with a big fat tarantula eyeing up Jake Gyllenhaal in the closing moments that serves as all anyone remembers from watching this creepy doppelganger affair. Yeah, that's right. Outside of the big spider, there's a whole thing about Jake Gyllenhaal becoming obsessed with a man that looks just like him. But let's be realistic here. If the room-sized, eight-legged freak scuttling into shot, with no warning I might add, is not the singular memory you retain from this strange little movie, then you're doing better than the rest of us cursed to arachnid nightmares forevermore. 1. The ending. Summer of 84.
Dude, come on.
Summer of 84 feels like a toothless version of something like The Goonies, just with way more boob talk. 4 friends are pulled into a plot to uncover a serial killer they believe to be living in their neighborhood, with charismatic police officer Wayne Mackey in the line of sight. As we reach the close, however, instead of the kids proving their neighbor is the killer,
that's a GG. That is a GG. That's a new world record. The first sub 121 world record by the fucking way after soft locking for more than like 400 fucking days, man. Like,
has gone missing upon being outed, or rather into hiding.
You want to become famous? You want to suck my fucking balls? Let's go, baby.
Cat and mouse in the woods. Legs are slashed, screams are stifled, and protagonist Davey is captured only to be told that he is not going to die by Mackey's hand in this situation. No, Mackey is going to let him go and come back for him at a later date, and there is nothing Davey can do about it. And that's it. That's the end. It is a sharp left turn that makes the movie, but one that hammers home a far more realistic.
I'm gonna clip that and fucking ship it. Let's go.
And that's our list. What of the surprisingly grim moments came out of nowhere? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash over on
That's
social
fucking
media
heat, man.
at Ash Millman, and this has been What Culture. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for some more spine-tingling horror content. Thanks for watching. Seeing might be believing, but that doesn't mean you have to bear all the very first chance you get. This is great advice, if I do say so myself, both for movies brewing up original monsters and for first dates too. But hey, if you guys want to slip out of your skin suit and reveal your lizard person visage in full straight away, that is none of my business at all. Just don't forget your neuralizers if it all goes pear-shaped, my Area 51 brethren. In any case,